Hello and welcome to the channel. Whether you're a passionate collector, a history enthusiast, or someone who simply enjoys uncovering the hidden stories behind everyday objects, I'm truly glad you're here. Today, we're about to journey back in time, through a stamp. Yes, a single postage stamp, but one that tells a story of royalty, architecture, artistry, and a changing world. This is the full story of the 2 shillings and 6 pence stamp, featuring Queen Elizabeth II and the historic Carnarvon Castle. It's a stamp that's small in size but rich in significance. So make yourself comfortable, and let's explore this timeless piece of history together. Issued in 1955, this stamp was part of a special high-value series that celebrated 4 iconic castles of the United Kingdom. These stamps were known collectively as the Castle series. While lower-value stamps were printed more commonly and used daily, these high-value stamps were used for heavier mail, special deliveries, and international parcels. This made them far less common in everyday use and much more collectible today. The 2 shillings and 6 pence denomination, often referred to as 2 and 6, was one of the most elegant in the series. Now let's talk about the artwork. The stamp features 2 main images, a young Queen Elizabeth II on the right, and the magnificent Carnarvon Castle on the left. This design wasn't chosen by chance. Carnarvon Castle is a symbol of power, heritage, and monarchy. Located in northwest Wales, it was built by King Edward I during his conquest of Wales in the late 13th century. But more than just a fortress, it was also a symbol of royal authority. Its design is inspired by Roman architecture, with polygonal towers and a sense of grandeur not seen in most medieval castles. It was meant to impress, and it still does. The castle became even more symbolically important in modern times. In 1969, it was the setting for the investiture of Prince Charles as Prince of Wales. Millions watched the ceremony around the world, further solidifying Carnarvon's place in royal history. So when the British Post Office chose it for the 2 shillings and 6 pence stamp in 1955, it was a perfect match, a structure rooted in history, paired with a monarch just beginning her reign. Speaking of the monarch, Queen Elizabeth II's portrait on this stamp is striking, calm, composed, and regal. It's based on a photograph taken by Dorothy Wilding, one of the most renowned royal photographers of the era. That photograph was then used as the model for the engraving that appears on the stamp. The image captures the young queen just a few years into her reign. Her crown, necklace, and elegant pose send a clear message. This is a symbol of continuity, duty, and grace. The engraving process used to create the stamp is called intaglio printing, or line engraving. Unlike modern digital printing, this process involves hand engraving lines into a metal plate. When ink is applied, it fills the lines, and pressure is used to press the image onto the paper. The result is a stamp that isn't just printed, it's sculpted, in a way. You can run your finger over it and feel the fine ridges. It gives the stamp a sense of weight and importance, a tactile reminder of the craftsmanship that went into its creation. Now, while this stamp was printed in large numbers, not many have survived in perfect condition. Stamps were meant to be used, stuck to letters, postmarked, and sent off on journeys around the world. That's what makes the unused, mint-condition version so special today. Collectors value stamps that still have their original gum, are well-centered, have strong color, and no damage. In philately, the world of stamp collecting, even the smallest imperfections can affect value. So how much is this stamp worth today? In 2025, the market value of the 2 shillings and 6 pence Queen Elizabeth II stamp varies based on its condition. A mint, never hinged copy in excellent condition can sell for around $1,000 to $1,500 US. If it's lightly hinged or has a small imperfection, it might fetch closer to $500 to $800. A used version, with a postmark, will typically go for around $100 to $300. But even at that price, collectors love them for their history and beauty. Sometimes, if the stamp is still attached to the original envelope, especially with a dated postmark or unique destination, the whole cover could be worth $1,000 to $2,000 or more, particularly if the letter has historical value. And in special cases, such as printing errors, color shifts, or unique plate markings, the value can rise significantly. While rare, these anomalies make the stamp even more desirable for experienced collectors. In some auctions, pristine versions or collectible variations have sold for over $3,000. But let's step back from the dollars and cents for a moment, because beyond its market value, this stamp is a symbol. It represents a queen at the dawn of her reign, a reign that would go on to become the longest in British history. It represents a castle that has stood for over 700 years, through battles, ceremonies, and centuries of change. It represents a time when the world still wrote letters by hand, waited for the postman, and used beautiful stamps to carry messages across the globe. Today, this stamp is a bridge between the past and the present. Whether you're a collector, a historian, or simply someone who appreciates the small details of life, the 2 shillings and 6 pence stamp reminds us that even the smallest objects can carry the biggest stories. So the next time you come across an old stamp, maybe in a drawer, a family album, or a collector's shop, take a moment to look closely. Ask yourself, what story does this little piece of paper hold? Because as we've seen, a stamp isn't just about postage, it's about people, places, moments in time. It's about history you can hold in your hand. Next up, the 5 shillings Queen Elizabeth II stamp, issued during a time of elegance, tradition, and change. More than just a stamp, this small rectangle of paper captures architecture, royalty, and craftsmanship in a way that still inspires admiration nearly 70 years later. So sit back and let's take a deep dive into its story. This particular stamp was issued in 1955, part of the prestigious Castle High Value series, which included the denominations of 2 shillings 6 pence, 5 shillings, 10 shillings, and £1. Each stamp in the series featured a different historic British castle paired with the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. These were high-denomination stamps, not used for everyday mail, but for special documents, large parcels, and important overseas correspondence. They carried weight, both literally and symbolically. The 5 shillings stamp, printed in a deep red color, features a beautifully engraved image of Carnarvon Castle, the same castle featured on the 2s60 stamp, but this time rendered in red with a different engraving. Carnarvon Castle is one of the most majestic castles in all of Britain, located in Wales, along the banks of the River Sion. Built in the 13th century by King Edward I, it wasn't just a fortress, it was a political statement. Its massive walls, polygonal towers, and striking layout were designed to impress, to dominate, and to symbolize English control over Wales. But it's also a place of royal tradition. In 1969, it was the site of the investiture of Prince Charles as Prince of Wales, an event broadcast around the globe. The choice to feature this castle on such a high-value stamp was a deliberate nod to both medieval power and modern monarchy. On the right side of the stamp, we see a poised and youthful Queen Elizabeth II, wearing the George IV state diadem, the same diamond-studded crown seen in her official portraits and many coins and banknotes. Her portrait is based on a photograph taken by Dorothy Wilding, and then transformed into a delicate line engraving by master artists. The calm expression and royal regalia embody dignity, continuity, and the quiet strength that defined her long reign. The artistic technique used here is known as intaglio engraving, where each line is carved into a metal plate by hand. Ink fills those grooves, and the image is pressed onto paper under high pressure, creating a textured, detailed surface. You can actually feel the lines when you touch the stamp, a tactile reminder of the care and precision that went into its creation. Unlike modern digital stamps, this one is a true piece of art, made by skilled engravers whose work continues to be admired today. This 5 shilling stamp wasn't mass use. Because of its high value, equivalent to £1/4 of a British pound, it was mostly used for registered mail, legal documents, and high-priority shipments, often to foreign countries. That means it saw limited circulation and, as a result, mint copies are relatively scarce today. So now the question, how much is this beautiful stamp worth in today's market? As of 2025, the value of a 5 shillings Queen Elizabeth II stamp depends largely on condition. A mint, unhinged, perfectly preserved stamp can sell for $1,500 to $3,000 US, sometimes more at auction. A slightly hinged or lightly marked version might fetch around $1,000 to $2,000. Used versions, with postmarks, are more common, and those typically go for $3,000 to $8,000 depending on clarity, cancellation, and presentation. If the stamp is still attached to an original envelope, especially one with a unique destination, a rare date, or wartime context, the value could rise to $2,000 or more, especially among collectors of postal history. And while the stamp is not considered rare in a general sense, examples in perfect condition or with printing errors can be significantly more valuable. But let's not focus only on dollars. The real value of this stamp lies in its history. It's a snapshot of a young queen beginning what would become the longest reign in British history. It's a tribute to one of the most iconic castles in the United Kingdom. It's a reminder of an era when postage stamps were works of art, and mail was something physical, tactile, and meaningful. Collectors cherish this stamp not just for its monetary value, but because it represents a period when design, tradition, and symbolism were at the heart of British philately. The Castle series as a whole has become one of the most admired in the world of stamps, and the 5 shillings red Carnarvon Castle is among its most beloved pieces. So whether you have one of these tucked away in an old album, inherited from a grandparent, or recently acquired through a collector's market, take a moment to admire it. Look closely at the towers of the castle, the engraving of the Queen's portrait, the balance of design and purpose. There's a story in every line, a legacy in every print. Next up, the 10 shillings Queen Elizabeth II stamp, printed in rich blue and featuring one of the most iconic castles in all of Scotland. At first glance, it might seem like just another old stamp, but behind this single design is a deep legacy of architecture, royalty, and the power of timeless design. So sit back and join me on this journey into the past, where every detail has meaning and every line tells a story. Issued in 1955, this stamp is part of the Castle High Value series, a set of 4 stamps that honored the great castles of the United Kingdom. These stamps weren't meant for ordinary letters, they were high-value issues, used on large parcels, overseas correspondence, and important documents. As such, they were produced with care, precision, and an eye toward national pride. The 10-shilling stamp, valued at £0.5 sterling, was the second highest in the series, and for good reason. Its subject is Edinburgh Castle, a fortress that towers above Scotland's capital on a dramatic volcanic rock known as Castle Rock. Edinburgh Castle is more than just a beautiful structure. It's a symbol of Scottish heritage, resistance, and resilience. With a history stretching back over 1,000 years, it has seen battles, royal births, sieges, and coronations. It housed monarchs and prisoners alike, and its walls still echo with stories of power and war. From the crown jewels of Scotland to the famous Stone of Destiny, it's a place loaded with meaning. It commands the skyline of Edinburgh, watching over the Royal Mile like a silent guardian. The decision to feature it on a high-value stamp was a deliberate tribute to Scotland's central place in British identity. On the stamp, the castle is shown in magnificent detail, perched above the rugged cliff face with its layered walls and turrets casting strong shadows. The engraver masterfully captured the depth, texture, and grandeur of the scene, and remember, this was all done by hand, using a method called intaglio engraving. Each line carved into the printing plate was done by skilled artisans, who understood that these stamps weren't just currency, they were works of art. To the right of the stamp, we once again see Queen Elizabeth II, young and regal, wearing the George IV state diadem. This portrait, based on a photograph by Dorothy Wilding, became iconic, used not only on stamps but on coins and official documents for decades. Her expression is calm, confident, and composed, reflecting the quiet strength with which she began her reign. The pairing of the Queen and Edinburgh Castle tells us everything we need to know about Britain in the 1950s, a monarchy rooted in history, enduring into a new era. Now, these high-value stamps were printed using recess engraving, which gave them rich colors and a raised texture you can actually feel with your fingertips. The deep navy blue ink of the 10-shilling stamp is especially striking, formal, elegant, and commanding. Unlike everyday stamps printed in millions, these high-value issues were produced in smaller numbers and saw limited circulation, which makes them far more desirable to collectors today. So what about the value? What's this stamp worth now, in 2025? The market value of the 10 shillings Queen Elizabeth II stamp varies based on condition and rarity. A mint, unhinged example, perfectly preserved, with full gum and no damage, typically sells for $2,500 to $4,000 US. If it's lightly hinged or shows small imperfections, you can expect $1,500 to $2,500. A used version, especially with a clear postmark, might fetch $5,000 to $1,000, depending on the date, clarity, and overall appearance. But certain stamps, such as those with rare printing errors, color variations, or plate flaws, can be worth significantly more. In some philatelic auctions, pristine versions or unique examples have been sold for $500 to $1,000 or more. And stamps that are still attached to the original envelope, especially if the cover has historical context, can fetch a premium. For example, a 1950s international airmail envelope with this 10-shilling stamp intact might sell for $3,000 to $6,000 depending on where it was sent, and how well it's preserved. But beyond monetary value, this stamp represents something far greater, a legacy. It connects us to a time when people wrote letters by hand, when kings and queens were stamped into wax and paper, and when a simple stamp could carry history across borders and oceans. The 10 shillings Castle stamp reminds us that design, tradition, and national identity were once expressed through the smallest of artworks. Collectors around the world admire this series for its beauty and its meaning. The detail in Edinburgh Castle, the grace in Queen Elizabeth's portrait, the richness of the printing, all combine to create a piece that's just as captivating now as it was in 1955. Whether it's tucked inside a stamp album or framed behind glass, this stamp holds a piece of the past. It's not just a tool for mailing, it's a messenger of history. So if you ever come across this 10-shilling stamp, maybe at a market, an estate sale, or inside an old collection, don't overlook it. Take a moment to appreciate what it represents. The Queen, the castle, the craftsmanship, and a nation proud of its past. Next up, the legendary £1 Castle stamp featuring Queen Elizabeth II and Windsor Castle. This isn't just a postal item. This is a symbol of a nation, a reflection of monarchy, and a masterwork of traditional engraving. From the design to its legacy, and even to its value in today's market, this stamp is a standout in both aesthetic excellence and historical importance. Whether you're a passionate stamp collector or simply curious about royal artifacts, this episode is for you. Let's begin in 1955, a time of rebuilding, change, and quiet power. Queen Elizabeth II had recently ascended the throne after the death of her father, King George VI. The post-war period saw Britain redefining itself, shedding colonial rule abroad and modernizing at home. Yet amid the changes, certain traditions remained firmly rooted, and one of those was the representation of monarchy and heritage through stamps. That same year, the British Postal Service introduced what is now known as the Castle High Value series, a set of 4 stamps intended for large parcels, overseas mail, and official documents. These weren't your everyday 1D or 3D issues. These stamps were printed with gravitas, designed to embody national unity across the 4 countries of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and England, and representing England, in its proudest and most powerful form, was the £1 stamp, featuring Windsor Castle, the official royal residence for over 900 years. Windsor Castle is more than a building. It is the beating heart of British monarchy, home to 40 monarchs, survivor of wars, fires, and political change. Originally built by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, Windsor has grown from a defensive stronghold into a grand palace. It has seen everything: medieval banquets, royal funerals, and in more recent memory, the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Queen Elizabeth II herself often spent weekends at Windsor, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, it became her primary residence. Even after her passing, it remains one of the most active symbols of monarchy in the modern age. So, when the £1 stamp was designed, it was only fitting that Windsor should take center stage. Now let's talk about the design. The image of Windsor Castle was based on a photograph by Alfred Lammer, a Viennese-born artist who had served in the British Army and became a well-known photographer in post-war Britain. His image was then handed over to the master engravers at Waterlow & Sons, where it was carefully transferred into an engraved plate. The engraving was done by Leonard C. Ellis, who painstakingly etched the tiny lines and shadows that give the image its depth and realism. It was printed using recess printing, or intaglio, a process where ink is pressed into carved lines, giving the image a tactile quality you can feel under your fingertips. To the right of the stamp, you see the elegantly engraved portrait of a young Queen Elizabeth II, wearing the George IV state diadem, the same crown she wore to the state opening of Parliament. The image is based on the famous Dorothy Wilding portrait, which was taken in 1952 and later adapted for postage use by artist H. Gordon Frost. Her expression is composed, serene, and dignified, a young queen leading a centuries-old institution into a new age. The overall tone of the £1 castle stamp is black and grey, a palette chosen for its solemnity and power. It radiates strength and elegance, a reminder that the monarchy, while modernizing, was still deeply tied to its roots. The size of the stamp is larger than standard issues, and that wasn't accidental. It gave more space to showcase the detailed artistry, the foliage in the foreground, the textured stonework of the round tower, and the crisp profile of the queen. Everything about this stamp communicates seriousness, prestige, and respect. Only a limited number of these stamps were produced compared to regular postage issues. While they were not rare in the traditional philatelic sense, their use was highly restricted. They were mainly seen on large business parcels, diplomatic envelopes, and international freight paperwork. Very few everyday people used a £1 stamp, especially during a time when that was equivalent to more than a full day's wage for many workers. And that leads us to the question collectors often ask: what is it worth today, in 2025? Well, the value of a stamp like this depends on several factors: condition, whether it's used or mint, presence of hinging, gum quality, and if it's part of a larger philatelic context such as a first-day cover or a complete series. A mint, unhinged £1 castle stamp in pristine condition, no marks, no damage, full gum, can sell for $600 to $1,200 US. A lightly hinged or slightly toned example may fetch $400 to $700. Used examples with clean, readable postmarks generally range from $150 to $300, with some interesting or rare postal markings pushing that price higher. A full set of Castle high-value stamps, 2 S6D, 5s, 10s, and £1, in mint condition can fetch $1,500 to $2,500 depending on the market and quality. Collectors also look for errors, varieties, and plate flaws, tiny imperfections in the printing that are often more valuable due to rarity. Some £1 stamps have been found with misaligned prints, re-entries, or color shifts, which can increase the price substantially. But the true value of the £1 castle stamp isn't just in dollars, it's in the story. This tiny rectangle of paper connects us to a moment in British history. A young queen beginning a reign that would become the longest in British history. A nation recovering from war, stepping into the modern world with dignity and strength. And a castle that has stood for nearly a millennium, anchoring the British monarchy across the tides of time. In an age of digital communication and emoji postage, the Castle High Value series reminds us that once upon a time, sending a letter was an act of ceremony, and stamps were designed not just to carry messages, but to carry meaning. So if you come across this stamp in an album, at a collector's fair, or in a family attic, hold on to it, not just for its value, but for what it represents. It is a work of art, a piece of politics, a living monument to craftsmanship. Thank you for staying with me through this deep dive into the story of the £1 Queen Elizabeth II castle stamp. If you enjoyed this exploration, be sure to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another look into the past. Whether you're a veteran philatelist or a curious newcomer, there's always more to discover, because history, as they say, is in the details. Leave a comment below if you own this stamp, or if there's another classic you'd like me to cover next. I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories. Until next time, keep collecting, keep learning, and remember, sometimes, the smallest things carry the greatest stories.